Beneath the polar poles of Mars, radar reveals something impossible. Structures, cavities, geometric patterns that shouldn't exist. In 2018, scientists discovered liquid water lakes trapped beneath miles of Martian ice, water that could sustain life. But the radar images show more: anomalies, shapes, symmetries. What if the ice caps of Mars aren't just frozen relics of a dead world? What if they're tombs or time capsules? What if something waits beneath the ice, preserved for millions of years, waiting to tell us the story of what Mars once was? Welcome to the polar mysteries of Mars, where science meets speculation, where radar data reveals secrets that change everything we thought we knew about the red planet.
Mars has haunted humanity for millennia. The ancient Egyptians called it Horus of the horizon, the bloody wanderer. The Greeks named it Ares, god of war. The Romans called it Mars. Every culture that looked up saw the red planet and knew something about it was different, aggressive, alive. In 1877, Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli observed what he called canali on Mars, channels. The word was mistranslated as canals, and suddenly the world believed Mars had been engineered by an advanced civilization. Percival Lowell spent decades mapping these supposed structures, convinced that a dying Martian race had built a planet-wide irrigation system to survive. They were wrong. The canals were optical illusions. But were they entirely wrong? Because now, with orbital radar, infrared spectroscopy, and ground-penetrating technology, we're discovering that Mars does have structures. Not canals on the surface, but something potentially more extraordinary. Anomalies beneath the polar ice caps, cavities large enough to hold cities, geometric formations that defy natural explanation, and liquid water existing against all odds in one of the coldest places in the solar system. The question isn't whether Mars had life. The question is, what did that life leave behind? And could it still be there, frozen in time, waiting beneath kilometers of ancient ice? Today, we investigate Mars's polar regions, the last unexplored frontier of the red planet. We'll examine the scientific data, explore the possibilities, and ask the question that keeps planetary scientists awake at night. What's really buried beneath the ice?
Mars' polar regions are unlike anywhere else in the solar system. The North Pole is covered by a permanent cap of water ice mixed with dust, stretching across a region larger than Greenland. During winter, a seasonal layer of carbon dioxide ice, dry ice, forms on top, making it even colder. The South Pole is similar, but more extreme, with thicker ice and more dramatic seasonal changes. For decades, scientists believed these polar caps were solid, dead, frozen remnants of Mars's ancient past. Then, in 2018, the European Space Agency's Mars Express orbiter made a discovery that changed everything. Using ground-penetrating radar called MARSIS, Mars Advanced Radar for Subsurface and Ionosphere Sounding, scientists detected a bright reflection 1.5 kilometers beneath the South Polar ice cap. The signal was unmistakable: liquid water. A lake roughly 20 kilometers across, existing in conditions that should make liquid water impossible. How? The pressure from the ice above, combined with geothermal heat from below and high concentrations of dissolved salts, creates conditions where water remains liquid at temperatures far below freezing. It's a hypersaline brine, similar to subglacial lakes beneath Antarctica's ice caps, but on another planet. But here's where it gets interesting. The 2018 discovery wasn't an isolated anomaly. In 2020, scientists found more bright radar reflections, suggesting multiple subsurface lakes scattered beneath the southern ice cap. Then, researchers began noticing other anomalies, reflections that weren't quite right, signals that suggested not just water, but voids, empty spaces, structures. Dr. Roberto Oresi, who led the initial discovery, stated that the radar data shows areas of high reflectivity that we don't fully understand. Some of these anomalies are too regular, too geometric to be natural ice formations. They appear layered, organized, almost architectural. In 2021, analysis of additional MARSIS data revealed what researchers describe as anomalous reflectivity patterns in multiple locations beneath both polar caps. These aren't just lakes, they're cavities, potentially kilometers across, with internal structures that radar can partially penetrate but not fully resolve. What could create such formations? Natural processes, ice caves formed by sublimation, volcanic activity creating lava tubes, or meteor impacts creating pockets beneath the ice are all possible. But some of the geometries are troubling. Straight lines, right angles, symmetrical patterns. The Martian ice caps are approximately 3.7 billion years old, dating back to when Mars had a thicker atmosphere and liquid water on its surface. If a Martian civilization existed during that time, a big if, but not impossible, the polar regions would be the logical place to survive as the planet died. Underground, protected from radiation, near permanent water ice, geothermally heated. And if they built cities there, those structures would now be entombed beneath kilometers of ice, perfectly preserved, waiting.
Let's explore what could exist beneath Mars's ice caps, starting with the most scientifically plausible scenario: ice caves. On Earth, ice caves form through various processes. Volcanic heat melts passages through glaciers. Flowing water carves channels. Even geothermal vents create massive caverns beneath Antarctic ice, some with their own unique ecosystems. Mars, with its volcanic history and potential geothermal activity, could host similar structures. The difference is scale. Mars's polar ice caps are up to 3 kilometers thick, far thicker than most terrestrial glaciers. Any caves beneath them would be enormous, protected, and completely isolated from the surface for millions of years. They would be time capsules, preserving whatever was inside when the ice sealed them away. Here's what we know. Mars was once warm and wet. Around 3.7 billion years ago, it had rivers, lakes, possibly even oceans. The atmospheric pressure was higher. Liquid water flowed on the surface. If microbial life evolved during this period, and many scientists believe it did, those microbes would have retreated underground as Mars lost its atmosphere and surface water froze or evaporated.
The subsurface is where Martian life would survive, and the polar regions, with their permanent ice providing radiation shielding and their potential geothermal heat sources, would be oases. Ice caves beneath the caps could harbor ecosystems, extremophile bacteria living in the liquid water lakes, surviving on chemical energy from the rocks, completely isolated from the surface for billions of years. But what if it's more than microbes? What if during Mars's habitable period, life evolved beyond the microscopic? What if intelligence emerged, even briefly, and that intelligence recognized the coming catastrophe, the loss of the atmosphere, the freezing of the planet, and moved underground? This is speculation, but it's informed speculation. On Earth, whenever life faces extinction-level threats, it adapts, it finds refuge. It survives in the most unlikely places, deep ocean vents, Antarctic ice, miles underground in solid rock. If Martian life faced planetary death, it would do the same, and the polar ice caves would be perfect refuges. Now, imagine those caves aren't empty. Imagine they contain structures, not built by humans, but by whatever called Mars home before it died. Settlements carved into ice and rock, archives of knowledge preserved in the one environment where they could survive billions of years. Technology, frozen and waiting. The radar can't tell us what's in those cavities. It only tells us they exist. But their presence suggests that beneath the frozen poles of Mars, there are spaces, voids, possibilities. And we won't know what's there until we go.
Here's where science meets mythology in the most intriguing way. Because ancient humans were obsessed with Mars, and some of their myths are strange. The Sumerians, one of the earliest known civilizations, had detailed astronomical knowledge that shouldn't have been possible. They accurately described the solar system, including planets that weren't discovered until the telescope was invented thousands of years later. Their texts speak of the Anunnaki, sky gods who came from a distant world and brought knowledge to humanity. The Sumerian word for Mars translates roughly to the Red Wanderer or the Fierce One. But their astronomical texts also describe Mars as a world that once had waters and where the gods dwelt before the Great Drought. How did ancient Sumerians know Mars had water? The Egyptians aligned the Great Pyramid with extraordinary precision to celestial bodies, including Mars at specific points in its orbit. The pyramid contains what some researchers call astronomical computers, shaft alignments that track planetary movements with accuracy that rivals modern calculations. Why did they care so much about Mars? Hindu texts describe Mangala, the Mars deity, as a warrior god who once ruled a great empire that fell to cosmic catastrophe. The Mahabharata, one of the oldest epics, contains passages describing advanced flying machines and weapons, but also mentions the red world that once shone green before the waters fled to the poles. Viking mythology speaks of realms of ice where gods sleep beneath frozen lambs, waiting for the time when they will wake. The Norse described Jotunheim as a realm of cold and ice, home to ancient beings of great power. Is this purely terrestrial mythology, or could it reflect some deeper, older memory? The Hopi Native Americans speak of previous worlds, including a red world that humanity inhabited before coming to Earth. Their oral traditions describe migrations from a dying planet, traveling through the stars, bringing knowledge of the sky with them. These are myths, stories, but they're remarkably consistent across cultures that supposedly had no contact. They all speak of Mars, or a red world, as having once been inhabited. They describe it as dying or dead. They mention ice, poles, and things waiting beneath the frozen places. Coincidence? Cultural contamination? Or could there be a thread of something real, some ancient knowledge passed down through millennia that hints at truths we're only now rediscovering through orbital radar and spectrometry? What if the gods from the sky weren't gods at all, but refugees? What if ancient humanity inherited some fragment of knowledge from earlier visitors, not necessarily Martians, but perhaps beings who once studied Mars or accessed information stored there, information about the solar system's history that included the story of Mars' transformation from habitable to dead? This is deep speculation. But when modern science discovers liquid water beneath Martian ice, and ancient myths speak of waters fleeing to the poles, when radar reveals structures beneath the ice, and mythology speaks of sleeping gods in frozen realms, the parallels are worth considering.
Let's paint a picture based on science, extrapolation, and informed imagination. What could actually be beneath Mars's polar ice caps? Scenario 1. Fossil beds. During Mars's wet period, the polar regions may have been temperate zones with lakes and rivers. When the climate shifted, organisms would have been rapidly buried and frozen, creating fossil beds of extraordinary preservation. Beneath the ice could be entire ecosystems frozen in time, evidence of what Martian life looked like 3.7 billion years ago. Scenario 2. Microbial ecosystems. The subsurface liquid water lakes detected by radar could harbor living microbial communities. On Earth, Lake Vostok, beneath Antarctica, contains bacteria that have been isolated for millions of years, evolving independently. Martian ice cap lakes could be biological treasure troves, life that survived the death of the surface world. Scenario 3. Ancient structures. If Mars had any form of complex life or intelligence during its habitable period, the polar regions would be natural shelter sites as the planet died. Structures, whether biological, like termite mounds or coral reefs, or technological, would be perfectly preserved beneath the ice. The geometric anomalies in radar data could be these structures. Cities, settlements, or installations built by whatever lived on Mars before it froze. Scenario 4. Time capsules. Advanced civilizations preserve knowledge. If Mars had intelligence, or if other intelligence visited Mars during its prime, the logical place to store information would be the most stable, protected location, deep beneath permanent ice. The polar caps could contain data archives, genetic libraries, or technological repositories, deliberately placed there to survive geological timescales. Scenario 5. Something still active. The most radical possibility. What if whatever is beneath the ice isn't dead? What if subsurface geothermal systems still provide energy? What if microbial or more complex life persists in the liquid water lakes? What if automated systems, built to last millions of years, still function in some capacity? The radar anomalies show some variations over time, changes in reflectivity that could be natural ice movements or could be something else. Something that responds to temperature shifts, seasonal changes, or even external stimuli. We won't know until we drill through the ice, and that's the challenge. Mars's polar ice is 3 kilometers thick. The environment is brutally cold. Any mission to explore beneath it would require drilling technology that doesn't exist yet, life detection equipment that can function in extreme conditions, and protocols for handling potential contamination, both protecting Mars from Earth organisms and protecting Earth from anything we might bring back. But the reward could be extraordinary. Proof of past or present Martian life, evidence of how planets die and what survives, possibly even technologies or knowledge from a civilization we never imagined existed. The ice caps of Mars are the ultimate mystery box, and we're finally developing the tools to open it.
The polar ice caps of Mars have held their secrets for billions of years. They've watched the planet transform from a warm, wet world with flowing rivers and possibly living ecosystems into the cold, desiccated desert we see today. They've preserved whatever existed during that transition, fossils, structures, perhaps even life itself. Modern radar technology has given us glimpses beneath the ice, liquid water lakes, geometric anomalies, vast cavities that could contain anything from microbial colonies to the ruins of something we've never imagined. Ancient myths from civilizations across Earth speak of Mars as a once living world, of waters retreating to the poles, of things sleeping beneath ice, waiting to be discovered. These myths may be nothing but stories, or they may be echoes of knowledge passed down through countless generations, hinting at truths we're only now equipped to verify. We stand at a unique moment in history. Within our lifetimes, missions to Mars will likely include drilling operations at the polar caps. We will send robots through the ice, into the subsurface lakes, into the anomalous cavities that radar has revealed. What we find will rewrite everything. If it's just ice and rock, we'll understand Mars' geological history better. If it's fossils, we'll prove life isn't unique to Earth. If it's living microbes, we'll discover that life persists even on dead worlds. And if it's something else, structures, technology, evidence of intelligence, we'll learn we were never alone. The ice remembers. It's preserved Mars' secrets for nearly 4 billion years, and soon, very soon, those secrets will be revealed. This is Myths of the Cosmos. If you want to explore more mysteries where ancient knowledge meets cutting-edge planetary science, where mythology hints at cosmic truths we're only beginning to understand, subscribe to our channel, because Mars isn't done surprising us. The red planet still has stories to tell, and some of those stories are buried beneath the ice, waiting. Until next time, keep looking up and wondering what waits beneath.